Hello and welcome to Occupied Thoughts, a podcast brought to you by the Foundation for Middle East Peace. I'm Peter Beinart, non-resident at the Foundation for Middle East Peace. Today is Friday, January 26th, and I'm delighted to be here with Tariq Habash. Tariq Habash is a Palestinian American who was a political appointee of the Biden administration in the Department of Education. He resigned from his post this month over the Biden administration's handling of Israel's war in Gaza. Tariq, thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks so much, Peter. It's also weird just to hear you say this month. It feels like almost an eternity, but here we are, just a few short weeks.
I can imagine it's been a pretty busy time for you. Maybe we could just start by talking a little bit about the experiences, the family history that has informed your views on this issue of Israel-Palestine.
Yeah, I'm happy to dive in. So like you said, I'm a Palestinian American. I'm a Palestinian Christian descending from generations of Palestinian Christians. I grew up here in the States. I'm a first generation Palestinian American. My parents came here at different times and met here in the States. But I largely grew up in an immigrant household, like millions of Americans across the country. With some ties to my roots, but largely, kind of shielded from all of the horrific realities that many Palestinians face every single day, and have faced for decades when it comes to the ongoing occupation, the lack of equal rights, the constant dehumanization. I think, you still feel that last part here in the diaspora here in the United States, particularly as an Arab man, growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s. And so for me, understanding my family's history was really important to understand why, we are where we are, learning from my parents about the importance of education, the fact that, my grandparents didn't have an opportunity to get an education. My parents valued education very deeply. They really encouraged me and my siblings to hold that very dear to our hearts. I think that was so important for us because, they grew up in the aftermath of 1948, but, my dad had a lot of siblings who were alive during the Nakba and who were forcibly displaced from their homes in Jaffa. And I heard stories from my aunts telling me about how they had to walk dozens of miles to find some sort of safety and security. I remember hearing stories about how, my grandma carried my uncle, who was a newborn baby, how my aunt carried her 2-year-old sister on essentially this march of death where they saw people starving, they saw people dying in the streets and really could do nothing about it, and all had to leave everything that they knew. They left their homes, they left their work, they left loved ones, they left friends. And the one thing that, we were always reminded of and instilled was that, anything can be taken from you. Your homes can be taken from you, your livelihood can be taken from you, but your education, the knowledge that you have, is not something that can be taken from you. Your identity cannot be taken from you. And so be proud that you're a Palestinian. Be proud that you are educated and that you have resources and support and loved ones around you who want to see you succeed and want to see you make the world a better place. And that's something that has just been with me from the very beginning, and one reason why I care so deeply about, working in education, addressing equity issues, and, join the administration in the very early days to be able to help make America a better place and to help improve our education system.
Hmm. So tell me about how you got connected to the Biden administration and whether initially, as you're working on educational policy, not foreign policy, but whether you initially had any misgivings as you got, about the policies that he had enunciated as a candidate, when it came to Israel-Palestine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I've been working in the federal higher education policy space, working on consumer protection issues and student loan issues, and just access and affordability for the better part of a decade here in Washington, D.C. For me, addressing racial equity and educational equity gaps was a really important issue that, I spent my life really working towards. And in that work, when you work on federal policy, you are always somewhat connected to whatever administrations are really setting the policy. A lot of your work gets in front of congressional offices, and so there's some level of politics that gets involved. Obviously, like as like a researcher, as an advocate, my work was traditionally nonpartisan, but I think as an individual, it was very important to me that our elected officials hold values that, align with my own values. For me, it was pretty clear early on, and for most of my adult life, that Democrats more clearly aligned with my values, supporting humanitarian issues, addressing those equity gaps, recognizing social justice issues, supporting women's rights, supporting, preserving our environment, and addressing climate change, like across the board on domestic policy and to a certain extent foreign policy issues. It was clear to me that as a progressive, as someone who believes in a lot of the same issues that a lot of Democrats believe, that it was more in line with me to help support and advance democratic politics as well. And so while in my normal everyday work, I was not doing political work, I volunteered on numerous occasions for Democratic candidates, phone banking, door knocking, and there was an opportunity to help the campaign in a volunteer capacity to help shape some of the education policy agenda for the campaign. And I jumped at that opportunity because it was something, like I said, I care very deeply about this, and I was willing to put in dozens of hours a week on top of my full-time job to ensure that those policies reflected the growing and urgent needs across American higher education, across a broken student loan system. And I think that there was a lot of really important work that was happening. With respect to your other question around, what my thoughts were on like possible misgivings related to the president's foreign policy approach, his history, his past positions, I think because I felt like I was in a space where, there was some alignment on the domestic issues that I, have professional expertise on, because I think generally my particular position on, the importance of humanizing Palestinians and, the broader Palestinian struggle and fight for equal rights and liberation was not necessarily the top of mind for, any campaign in that moment. I think there are obviously huge risks to a second Trump term. As someone who was very clearly supportive of the, like, arguably the most extreme Israeli regime that we have seen to date, I think that it felt at the time that there was significantly less risk to the region and from a foreign policy perspective, on a Biden administration taking over and bringing humanity and a focus on human rights to the table, and making rational decisions. That's what the president said that he was going to do, and it's been an unfortunate outcome what we've seen these last 3.5 months.
So tell me about what things were like then for you inside the administration after October 7th.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were a lot of people who were hurting for a lot of different reasons. I had peers and colleagues who had friends and family members who, suffered on October 7th. At the same time, like I knew a lot of Palestinians who had families who were suffering from the aftermath, who have family who've lost dozens of family members, and the reality that there was not a immediate effort to de-escalate and to rely on diplomacy first to both return all the affected innocent people, hostages on both sides, those that were taken on October 7th by Hamas, and also those who by the thousands have been illegally detained by the Israeli government and military, both in the aftermath and also months prior. I think there was a huge level of, emotional and mental harm for people within the administration. And I think that impact that it had, I think, on me was really profound because, something that I wanted to talk about. I felt like having a conversation and a dialogue was really important, and finding that dialogue was actually really difficult. And those first few weeks were extremely hard for a lot of us because everyone felt so isolated, and it didn't feel like there were opportunities to engage with people who were making decisions and enabling what was very clearly like failed policy that was resulting in massive levels of casualties.
Yeah. And so did you did you start by, or kind of, what kind of channels of conversation started opening up inside the administration among people who were dissatisfied with the administration's response?
Yeah, I mean, I think people started to find each other because there was so much dissatisfaction, and you have affinity groups who eventually were reached out to by the White House just to do listening sessions, and there were like mental health consultation opportunities, and for the State Department, obviously, like there was guidance on how State Department officials could submit, formal dissent cables, but that doesn't really exist in any other federal agencies, which also made it harder just to even vocalize your concerns about the ongoing policies. And so just through those like mental health, let's try and take care of ourselves sessions, that I think led to those listening sessions where I think the White House, honestly, it felt more like a check the box rather than we want to hear your concerns and we want to hear about what's bothering you, and let's find a way to internalize some of the feedback that we're getting from our staff who we rely on every single day to advance our agenda. It really felt more like, tell us your feelings, but the people who should hear it and who need to hear it the most, they're not going to be there.
And what was it that ultimately led you then to decide you had to resign?
I don't think it was any one particular thing. I mean, for me, it was through almost 3 months of just trying to find ways to communicate the frustration with the language that the administration used that dehumanized Palestinians. It was the frustration with the policies that the administration was taking to circumvent laws that are designed to prevent our military funding from being used in violation of international humanitarian law. It was the fact that we continue to provide that funding with absolutely no stipulations, no concerns. I think the fact that there were resignations like those of Josh Pauls, who made it clear that like being intimately involved in those conversations and the oversight of weapons transfer, and making it clear that even in that circumstance, there was not a willingness to engage in real dialogue about the risks and harms that could occur. I think a lot of those types of things raise red flags. I think the fact that the president openly questioned the death counts, I think the talking points that led to further dehumanization of Palestinians and allowed for Palestinians to be harmed in hospitals, not just once, but repeatedly and almost on a daily click. I think like that was really, really concerning. And I think seeing all of that happen in real time with no condemnation for the horrific circumstances that Palestinians were living in. The fact that there was ongoing collective punishment from nearly day one that cut off Palestinians from food and water and medical supplies and electricity, that there were numerous instances where Palestinians were completely cut off from telecommunication services, like blackouts leading to even worse circumstances that we couldn't even see. The things that were happening we couldn't fathom, and seeing daily atrocity after atrocity where children, women, journalists, medical professionals, men, people who you see yourself in, that you can't do anything to help them, and you see them suffering at that scale. It felt like the only thing that I could do at that point was to try and you find a way to be even louder about my concerns. And I felt like I had exhausted every opportunity, having talked with the Secretary of Education, having talked with the White House on numerous occasions. It just was clear that no matter who was raising those concerns, the policies weren't changing, our position wasn't changing, and being associated with the ongoing dehumanization and massacring of Palestinians, that it really could have been me if I was there. Like that's just, it was too hard to stay, and I had to leave.
And when you had these conversations with, did people say, you're wrong, this policy, we think this is the right policy, or did people acknowledge that they had their own concerns with the policy, but said, you just need to stay and try to do good in whatever field what was the kind of response that when you went to people and told them about how much distress you were in?
Yeah, I think it depends on the conversation, obviously. There was a lot of sympathy and understanding on a personal level. I think people recognized the toll that it was taking on me, and they wanted me to be okay, whatever that turned into or however it manifested. If I needed to take some time just to take care of my mental and physical health, they were supportive of that. If that meant that I work on other issues so that I can really ensure that I'm still making a difference and helping people, that was something that they were supportive of. I think even to the point of, like, the day that I resigned, the conversation I had with the secretary, he was nothing short of supportive and empathetic and hopeful that I can find a path to continue to do really important work. He was gracious and a friend throughout. But I think where the line kind of ended was what our willingness is in terms of changing the direction and acknowledging the horrific circumstances that we are creating and continuing. And I don't think I ever got that from the administration. I don't ever think that there were circumstances where people in positions of power were willing to say, what is happening is wrong, what we are doing is wrong, we disagree with this, but there is nothing we can do to change it. And I think that kind of shows that it's within our power. We're just ignoring our role in the continued circumstances.
Have you talked subsequently to other folks who are thinking about resigning?
Yeah, I've heard from a lot of folks over the last few weeks. It's been actually an incredible response, a ton of positive feedback. People who have told me that they are hopeful because they feel like there is maybe a path for them to do something similar. And I've heard from numerous people who have shared that they're thinking very seriously about leaving. I haven't seen anything happen yet, obviously, and hopefully with today's news, obviously the ICJ raising concerns, I think that makes it a real possibility that people see that our government's continued support of the Israelis' offensive actions in Gaza creates further risk to both the United States's international position, but also just our overall complicity in what's happening, which is really concerning. And hopefully that encourages people that, you know, there isn't much else that we can do short of completely changing course other than leaving.
One of the things that I think has been interesting, in this case, which I can't really recall seeing before, is the way in which people who have stayed inside the administration have essentially been organizing inside their own administration against the administration's policy, which is really quite striking to watch. I'm wondering if you think those efforts are ongoing, if you think they have any possibility of having a positive effect.
Yeah, I don't know. At this point, I think we're grasping for straws to figure out what will have an effect, what could, change the tides of the water even by a fraction. I think the reality is that there's pressure coming from all sides, and that includes from within the administration, both from political staffers. It seems like there's some pressure from career civil servants as well. We've seen it from the State Department to USAID to dozens of other federal agencies that have, sent some kind of message, whether that's through an anonymous letter or continued anonymous actions. I know there was a vigil before the holidays last year. I guess it was right after Hanukkah, but there was also, I think most recently, just announcement yesterday related to the that feel-good party that I think the chief of staff put on for folks that I think I saw it on Dear White Staffers. There was a call for people not to attend that because of the ongoing situation in Gaza. And it doesn't seem like there are people who are letting up, and it does feel like the constant dissent, both internally and externally, is taking a toll on the administration in some way, on the campaign in some way. Is it going to change the policies? I don't know, but I don't think anyone knows what will or won't change our current position right now.
And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about why it is that the Biden administration has pursued this path. I mean, I've heard some people speculate that this is just Joe Biden's own gut instincts and perhaps lack of ability to truly humanize Palestinians in the way he can humanize Israeli Jews, or whether it's a group of people around him who may not have that many folks who have backgrounds like you, who are in positions of real power on foreign policy. Or wondering if you have thoughts about why you think, because this is clearly the Democratic Party base is not where this administration is at this moment, and yet the administration is generally hewing to this policy. I'm curious if you have thoughts about why that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. This is not where the Democratic Party's base is. It's not where younger voters are. It's not where voters of color are. I think it has real long-term concerns for the party, both in 2024 and beyond, because the position that the president and the administration are staking out undermines a lot of the president's message. I think the president has talked about protecting American democracy in this moment, but he's not listening to his voters. And I think in a lot of ways, his decision to stake out such a clear, different position from the majority of voters really raises concerns about how willing he is to hear his voters and to change course amid a threat like Donald Trump. And so I think it's a really, really important question. And the reason for why he's staking out this position, it's really hard to say, particularly in the context of, his empathy both to Israeli Jews, but also to Ukrainians, for example. I think he was extremely empathetic to the Ukrainian struggle following the Russian aggression. And I think a lot of people expected a similar type of response to Palestinians. But I think decades of dehumanization of Palestinians by our government, by our media, and I think the ongoing occupation that has led to, I think, unequal rights for Palestinians has created this circumstance where Palestinians aren't treated as human, they're not treated as equal, and it's okay to do that because there's something that makes them less worthy of that humanity. And I think that's wrong. I think it's racist, and I think it's really dangerous.
So my last question is, I'm just curious if I hope this is not too personal, but I wonder how your parents reacted when they heard about the decision you were making, given on the one hand, they had sacrificed so much for your education and for you to be able to have this remarkable position that you were jeopardizing. And on the other hand, you were doing it because of, your commitment to Palestinians. I'm just curious how they reacted to that.
Yeah, I mean, my parents are the prototypical Palestinian parents who just want to make sure that their kids have better opportunities than they did. And for them, their biggest worry was my own safety. Um, they didn't want me to put myself in a situation where I endangered myself, that I risked my financial security. They wanted me to make sure that I could continue to live the life that they tried so hard to create for me. And so I think after I was able to communicate to them why it was so important to take a position, to publicly say something, to raise my voice, and that I would be okay given all of those other circumstances and concerns, I think they were really supportive. They've been encouraging. They have been, you know, just the best parents that I could ask for. And I appreciate them every single day for the support and everything that they've been able to provide for me. And if there's one thing that I can do to help them be able to, go visit their home, to be able to see the places that they grew up, and to help, millions of Palestinians living in the diaspora to be able to do that too, that means more to me than holding on to a job that's helping millions of Americans as well, but also temporary, where I can continue to also still help people from other perches. So
Tarek, thank you so much. And I just want to thank our listeners for tuning in to this episode of Occupied Thoughts. Please make sure to check out the FMEP website, fmep.org, for resources related to this podcast and lots of other great content related to Palestine and Israel. And please make sure you're subscribed to this podcast to stay up to date. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Spotify, and also watch video versions of our podcast, including this one on YouTube. And with that, I'm Peter Beinart signing off until the next episode of FMEP's Occupied Thoughts.